The bank statement in my hands trembled slightly as I stared at the zeros. Not the good kind of zeros, the kind that follow meaningful numbers. Just zeros. Empty, hollow, devastating zeros where my college fund should have been. Sweetheart, we need to talk, my mother had said 20 minutes earlier, her voice carrying that particular tone she reserved for delivering news she knew would shatter me. The same tone she'd used when she told me we couldn't afford the violin lessons I'd begged for, or when she explained why Emma got the bigger bedroom when we moved houses. The account, the one Dad had opened when I was 7, the one he'd made such a show of contributing to every birthday and Christmas, the one he'd pointed to whenever I asked for anything beyond the absolute necessities, was empty, completely, utterly empty. We gave it to Emma for her wedding, Mom continued, wringing her hands in that way that meant she knew exactly how wrong this was, but was committed to justifying it anyway. She needed it more. You understand, don't you? You're so smart, so capable. You'll figure something out for college. Emma? Well, Emma needs more help. I understand now, with the crystalline clarity that only comes from having your entire worldview shattered in a single moment, that this was never about Emma needing help. This was about who they loved more, who they believed in more, who they thought deserved more. And I finally understood exactly where I stood in their hierarchy of affection. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here. For as long as I can remember, Emma was the golden child. 3 years older, blonde where I was brunette, effortlessly charming where I was quietly studious. She moved through our house like a small sun that everyone else orbited around. My parents' faces would light up when she entered a room. They'd lean forward when she spoke, hang on her every word, laugh at jokes that weren't particularly funny, simply because they'd fallen from her perfect lips. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one. The one who did her homework without being asked, helped with dinner, kept my room clean, earned straight A's semester after semester. I was reliable, dependable, and thoroughly taken for granted. When Emma was 16 and wanted a car, Dad worked overtime for 3 months to buy her a cherry red Honda Civic. When I turned 16, they suggested I could borrow Mom's old sedan when I really needed it, which translated to almost never since Mom always seemed to really need it herself. When Emma struggled with algebra, they hired a tutor and rearranged their work schedules to drive her to sessions 3 times a week. When I asked for help with AP chemistry, Dad glanced up from his newspaper long enough to say, "You're smart enough to figure it out yourself." When Emma wanted to take dance classes, voice lessons, and art camp, they found the money. When I expressed interest in coding boot camps or science camps, suddenly money was tight. The pattern was so consistent, so relentless, that I stopped noticing it as cruelty and started accepting it as natural law. Emma sparkled, so she got attention. Emma struggled, so she got help. Emma wanted, so she received. And I got the leftovers, the afterthoughts, the we'll see promises that inevitably became not this time. But through it all, there was the college fund. Dad had made such a production of starting it, calling me into his study when I was 7 to watch him write the first check. "This is for your future," he'd said, ruffling my hair with uncharacteristic affection. "Every dollar we put in here is an investment in how proud we know you're going to make us." For 11 years, that fund represented everything I'd worked toward. Every A on a report card, every science fair blue ribbon, every night I'd stayed up late studying while Emma was out with friends. It was all for that fund. For the future it represented. For the possibility of escaping this house, where I'd always be the understated supporting character in Emma's starring role. I'd check the balance obsessively through high school, watching it grow with birthdays and Christmases and Dad's occasional bonuses. By senior year, it was enough for 4 years at a decent state school with money left over for books and a laptop. It was my ticket out, my proof that all the years of being overlooked had been building toward something. And now it was gone. "How long ago?" I asked, my voice sounding strange and distant even to my own ears. "The wedding is next month," Mom said, still wringing her hands. "The caterer needed the deposit, and you know how expensive weddings are these days." Emma was so stressed, crying every night about the money. We couldn't just watch our daughter suffer when we had the means to help. "I'm your daughter too." The words came out so quietly, I wasn't sure I'd actually spoken them aloud until I saw Mom's face crumple with guilt. Of course you are, sweetheart, but you have to understand. Emma's getting married. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. College will always be there. You can take out loans, get scholarships, work your way through. You're resourceful like that. Resourceful. That was their word for me when they wanted to feel better about giving me less. When Emma got a full birthday party with 30 friends and a professional magician, and I got dinner at Pizza Hut, I was resourceful enough to have fun anywhere. When Emma got name brand clothes and I got generic everything, I was resourceful enough to make anything look good. When Emma got private tutoring and I taught myself calculus from library books, I was resourceful enough to succeed without help. I was always resourceful enough to deserve less. Besides, Mom continued, her voice gaining confidence as she built her justification, you're only 17. You have time to figure something else out. Emma needed this money now. I stood up slowly, the bank statement still clutched in my hand. Something inside me was changing, crystallizing into a hard, cold clarity I'd never felt before. For 17 years, I'd absorbed their priorities, accepted their distribution of love and resources, convinced myself that if I just worked harder, achieved more, proved myself worthy, things would change. But things weren't going to change. I could see that now with perfect, devastating clarity. I could graduate valedictorian, cure cancer, and become president of the United States, and Emma would still be their princess, while I remained the resourceful afterthought who could handle anything because I'd never been given a choice. Okay, I said. Mom blinked, clearly expecting more of a fight. Okay, I understand. And I did understand. I understood exactly who they were, who I was to them, and what I needed to do about it. I walked upstairs to my room, the smaller one, of course, because Emma needed the bigger one for all her things, and sat down at my desk. For the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about what my parents wanted from me, what would make them proud, what would finally earn me the love they seemed to lavish so easily on my sister. I was thinking about what I wanted, and what I wanted was to never, ever, be in a position where someone else's whims could destroy my future again. I'd been coding since I was 12, teaching myself from online tutorials and library books during the long hours when Emma was at her various activities, and I was left to entertain myself. What had started as a desperate attempt to fill lonely afternoons had developed into a genuine skill, then a passion, then something approaching expertise. By sophomore year, I was building websites for local businesses, charging just enough to cover hosting costs because I loved the work and didn't need the money. After all, I had my college fund. By junior year, I'd taught myself app development and created a simple inventory management system for the corner store where I worked part-time. The owner, Mr. Chen, had been so impressed he'd started recommending me to other business owners, and I'd done all of this quietly, never mentioning it at home because technical achievements never seemed to register with my parents the way Emma's social successes did. When Emma made varsity cheerleading, Dad took time off work to attend practice. When I won a regional coding competition, I celebrated alone with a Starbucks coffee and the quiet satisfaction of work well done. But now, sitting in my room with the ruins of my college fund scattered around me like radioactive fallout, I realized I'd been thinking too small. I pulled out my laptop and started making lists. Not wish lists or dream boards, but concrete, actionable plans. I had skills. I had experience. I had exactly 8 months before I was supposed to start college. 8 months to build something that would make college a choice rather than a desperate necessity. I thought about Mr. Chen's inventory system, how excited he'd been about the way it streamlined his operations. I thought about the other small business owners who'd asked me to build similar systems, how I'd always said I was too busy with school to take on big projects. I wasn't too busy anymore. I had nothing but time and the kind of crystalline motivation that only comes from having everything you'd counted on stripped away. I opened a new document and started typing. Synergy Plus, Integrated Business Management Solutions for Small and Medium Enterprises. For the next 3 hours, I researched, planned, and outlined. I identified my target market, mapped out essential features, calculated development timelines and pricing structures. I designed a business model that could scale from a one-person operation to something much larger. Most importantly, I figured out how to do it without anyone noticing. My parents saw what they expected to see, their resourceful younger daughter dealing with disappointment in her typical quietly competent way. When I started spending even more time at my computer, they assumed I was researching scholarship opportunities or college alternatives. When I began working longer hours at Mr. Chen's store, they figured I was saving money for school expenses. They weren't entirely wrong. I was planning for my future, just not in the way they imagined. I started with Mr. Chen. He'd been asking for months if I could expand his inventory system to handle employee scheduling and basic customer relationship management. It was exactly the kind of project I'd been avoiding because the scope was too big for a side hobby. Now it was perfect. I can build you something comprehensive, I told him during my shift the next week. Full business management suite, inventory, scheduling, customer database, basic accounting integration, mobile app for employees. But it'll cost more than my usual projects. Mr. Chen leaned forward, interested. I'd proven myself reliable over the past year, and his current mishmash of handwritten schedules and Excel spreadsheets was driving him crazy. How much more? I named a figure that made him whistle softly. It was 10 times what I'd charged for simple website work, but still a fraction of what enterprise software would cost him. That's a significant investment, he said slowly. It is. But think about what you're spending on inefficiencies right now. Sarah spent 2 hours last week trying to figure out why the inventory numbers didn't match the register. You've lost 3 customers this month because you didn't know their purchase history when they came in with complaints. Your nephew had to come in on his day off because the schedule got mixed up. I pulled out my phone and showed him the prototype I'd been building. Clean, intuitive interface, real-time data synchronization, automated reporting features. This isn't just software, Mr. Chen. This is getting your time back. This is knowing exactly what's happening in your business at any moment. This is being able to focus on growth instead of constantly putting out fires. He stared at the prototype for a long time. When could you have it ready? 6 weeks for full deployment, 2 weeks for basic functionality so you can start seeing benefits immediately. He extended his hand. Deal. That night, I opened my first business bank account. Not in my parents' house, where every piece of mail was fair game for family scrutiny, but with an address at a UPS store 2 miles away. I filed for an LLC, researched business insurance, set up professional email accounts, and a legitimate website. My parents never noticed the occasional absences when I claimed to be at the library. They never questioned why I was suddenly so knowledgeable about business licenses and tax structures. They were too busy planning Emma's wedding, agonizing over flower arrangements and seating charts, basking in the glow of their golden child's fairy tale moment. I was becoming invisible again, but this time it was by choice. This time, invisibility was my competitive advantage. Mr. Chen's system went live ahead of schedule, and the results were immediate. His inventory accuracy improved by 95% in the first week. Employee scheduling conflicts disappeared. Customer complaints dropped to nearly zero because staff could instantly access purchase histories and previous interaction notes. More importantly for me, Mr. Chen started talking. Small business owners formed tight networks, sharing recommendations and horror stories, with the passionate intensity of people who understand each other's struggles. Within 2 weeks of deployment, I had 3 new inquiries. Within a month, I had a waiting list. I streamlined my development process, creating modular components that could be quickly customized for different business types. A restaurant needed different features than a retail store, but the underlying architecture could support both. I built templates, automated deployment processes, created documentation that actual humans could understand. By month 3, I wasn't just building custom solutions anymore. I was creating a platform that small business owners could configure themselves with the option to pay for customization and support services. Instead of one-off projects, I was generating recurring revenue through software subscriptions and maintenance contracts. My parents still saw me as their quietly studious daughter, maybe a little more serious lately, but still fundamentally the same responsible child they'd always been able to count on. They had no idea that I was running client calls during my lunch breaks, conducting demos via video chat from my bedroom, managing a business that was already generating more monthly revenue than Dad's salary. Emma's wedding approached like a golden hurricane, consuming every conversation, every family dinner, every weekend planning session. The house filled with fabric samples and catering menus, and extended family members who all seemed to know intimate details about cake flavors and bouquet arrangements. I moved through it all like a ghost, contributing the appropriate responses when directly questioned but otherwise invisible, which suited me perfectly. I used the chaos to my advantage, knowing that nobody would notice if I stepped out to meet clients or spent entire evenings studying while actually managing my growing business. I hired my first contractor, a brilliant developer in Romania who could implement features faster than I could design them. I brought on a part-time customer service representative who worked remotely from her home in Phoenix. By month 5, Synergy Plus wasn't just a business. It was a real company with real employees, serving real clients who were seeing measurable improvements in their operations. I'd processed more than $200,000 in revenue and was projecting steady growth for the next 12 months. And still, my parents had no idea. "We need to talk about college," Dad said one evening in late February, cornering me in the kitchen while I was grabbing a snack between client calls. The wedding was 2 weeks away. The house was in complete chaos, and apparently now they were remembering that their younger daughter's future still needed addressing. "What about it?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Applications are due soon. Have you been working on essays, researching loan options? Your mother and I feel terrible about the fund situation, but Emma's wedding—" "I understand," I interrupted smoothly. "Emma needed it more." He looked relieved that I wasn't going to relitigate the college fund. "Exactly. You're so mature about these things. So what's your plan?" I could have told him the truth in that moment. I could have explained that I'd built a thriving business from nothing, that I was already financially independent, that I had options he couldn't imagine. I could have shown him bank statements that would have made him recalculate everything he thought he knew about his resourceful younger daughter. Instead, I smiled and said, "I'm exploring alternatives. Taking a gap year might be the smart move anyway. Give me time to save money and really figure out what I want to study." "That's very sensible," he said, patting my shoulder with the absent affection he reserved for moments when I was making his life easier. "We raised you to be practical." Practical, resourceful, sensible. These were the words they used when they wanted to feel better about giving me less, when they needed to justify why Emma got dreams and I got pragmatism. I nodded and retreated to my room, where I had a video call scheduled with a potential client in Seattle who'd heard about Synergy Plus through 3 degrees of separation from Mr. Chen. The word-of-mouth referral network I'd built was becoming genuinely impressive. As I listened to the client describe their business challenges, I realized something that filled me with a satisfaction deeper than any college acceptance letter could have provided. I wasn't taking a gap year. I wasn't scrambling for alternatives. I was choosing my path, building my future, creating something that belonged entirely to me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking permission or waiting for someone else to decide what I deserved. Emma's wedding was everything she'd dreamed of and more. The venue was stunning, the flowers were perfect, the food was exceptional. Every detail was exactly as she'd envisioned, funded by my education, and orchestrated by my parents' boundless enthusiasm for her happiness. I wore the bridesmaid dress she'd chosen, a shade of blue that washed me out completely but made her look radiant by comparison, and smiled for photos and made appropriate conversation with relatives who mostly remembered me as Emma's little sister, if they remembered me at all. During the reception, while Emma danced with her new husband to a song that had cost more than most people's monthly rent to have performed live, I stepped outside to take a call from a client whose system had crashed. 20 minutes later, I'd talked their IT person through a restart sequence and had them back online. "Work call?" asked a voice behind me. I turned to find David, Emma's new brother-in-law. He was maybe 25, worked in tech, and had always been kind to me during the whirlwind of wedding preparations. Unlike most of Emma's circle, he seemed to actually see me as a person rather than just wedding party furniture. "Something like that," I said, tucking my phone away. "I couldn't help overhearing. You were debugging a database connectivity issue?" I nodded, wondering how much I wanted to reveal. "That's impressive. Most people our age can barely troubleshoot their Wi-Fi. You sounded like you really knew what you were talking about. I work with small business software, I said carefully. Cool, like technical support? Something like that. He studied my face for a moment, clearly sensing there was more to the story. Well, if you ever want to talk shop, I'm always interested in meeting people who actually understand the technical side. I'm in product management at a startup downtown. We exchanged contact information, and I filed the interaction away as potentially useful but probably irrelevant. I wasn't looking for networking opportunities at my sister's wedding, but as I watched him return to the reception, I realized something had shifted. For the first time, someone in my family's orbit had seen me as competent, knowledgeable, worth talking to about subjects that mattered. Not resourceful or practical or sensible, actually skilled. It was a small moment, but it crystallized something I'd been feeling for months. I was outgrowing this family's perception of me. I was becoming someone they didn't recognize, someone who didn't fit the box they'd built for their quietly capable younger daughter. Soon, I wouldn't fit in that box at all. 3 weeks after the wedding, Mom found the bank statements. I'd been careless letting mail pile up on my desk while I traveled to Portland for a client meeting. Synergy Plus was expanding faster than I'd anticipated, and I was considering opening a Seattle office to serve Pacific Northwest clients more effectively. I'd been too focused on growth projections and hiring plans to maintain my usual operational security. "What is this?" she asked, holding the envelope like it might explode. I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been reviewing code with my Romanian developer. The return address clearly identified First National Bank, and my business name was printed in neat corporate font below my real name. "It's a bank statement," I said calmly. "Oh, I can see that. Synergy Plus LLC? What is Synergy Plus?" I saved my work and closed the laptop. 7 months of careful invisibility were about to end, and I felt strangely relieved. "It's my business." She stared at me like I'd announced I was actually an alien. "Your business?" "I develop software solutions for small and medium businesses. I've been doing it since September." "You've been since September?" "That's when we told you about the college fund." "Yes. How much, this balance?" She was staring at the statement like the numbers might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. "How much what? How much money is in this account?" I considered lying, minimizing, deflecting. That's what the old me would have done. Make myself smaller, less threatening, easier to ignore. Instead, I told her the truth. As of this statement, about $400,000, but that was 2 weeks ago. It's probably closer to $450 now. The bank statement fluttered from her fingers like a wounded bird. 400. She sat down heavily on my bed. $1,000. Yes. How? I explained briefly and factually. The initial projects, the platform development, the scaling strategy, the client base that now spanned 8 states. I showed her the Synergy Plus website, the client testimonials, the case studies documenting measurable business improvements. She listened in complete silence, her expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and something that might have been awe. "Why didn't you tell us?" "When? During one of Emma's wedding planning sessions? Between discussions of flower arrangements and seating charts? When exactly would have been the appropriate time to mention that your resourceful younger daughter had become financially independent? That's not fair, isn't it?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at my laptop like it had personally betrayed her. "Your father needs to know about this." "Okay, this changes everything." "Does it?" She looked at me sharply. "Of course it does. You don't need to take a gap year. You can afford college now. You can afford any college." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You're right. I can afford college. I can afford a house. I can afford to travel the world, start additional businesses, invest in other startups. I can afford to do whatever I want." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud." "Are you?" The question hung between us like a challenge. "Of course I am. You've accomplished something incredible." "I've accomplished something incredible while you ignored me completely. I built a business that generates more monthly revenue than Dad's annual salary while you were worried about whether Emma's wedding favors matched her color scheme perfectly." I became financially independent while you were explaining to me why I didn't deserve the education fund you'd promised me for 11 years. We didn't ignore you. We've been supportive. You gave my college fund to Emma for a party. A wedding isn't a party. You gave my future to Emma for one day of being the center of attention she's always been anyway. Mom's face crumpled. We thought, you're so capable, so independent. Emma needs more help. Emma needs more help because you never expected her to help herself. You gave her everything and told me to be grateful for scraps. You made her helpless and me invisible. That's not true. I pulled out my phone and showed her my calendar. I have client meetings scheduled in 3 cities next week. I'm interviewing candidates for 2 developer positions. I'm negotiating a partnership with a major business consulting firm. I'm building something that could become a multi-million-dollar company. I paused, letting that sink in. And until 30 minutes ago, you thought I was spending my time researching community college programs and part-time job opportunities. She had no response to that because there was no response. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Where is your father? She asked finally. Probably watching the game in the living room. We need to talk to him together. Okay. But I already knew how this conversation would go. I'd seen this pattern my entire life. Crisis, damage control, family meeting, new normal where they pretended things had always been different. The difference was that this time I didn't need their approval or their support or their belated recognition. This time I had options. Dad's reaction was predictably theatrical. First disbelief, then denial, then a kind of manic excitement as he began calculating all the ways my success reflected well on him. I always knew you had it in you, he said, pacing around the living room while I sat calmly on the couch. Remember when you were 7 and I started that college fund? I told you it was an investment in your future. I was right, wasn't I? I just didn't know you'd be investing in yourself. I stared at him with the kind of detached fascination usually reserved for wildlife documentaries. Here was a man who had literally stolen my college fund 3 months ago, now trying to take credit for the success I'd built in spite of his betrayal. You're going to need help managing this kind of money, he continued. Financial advisors, tax specialists, investment strategies. Lucky for you, I know people in those fields. I already have a CPA and a financial advisor, I said. I set that up in October. Oh, well, that's good. Very responsible, but this is going to grow, right? You'll need more sophisticated planning. Probably. We should sit down and go over your business plan. Make sure you're thinking strategically about expansion. I almost laughed. What do you know about business strategy for software companies? I know about business. I've been running my department for 12 years. You've been a middle manager at an insurance company for 12 years. I'm building a technology platform that's already operating in 8 states. His face flushed. There's no need to be condescending. I'm not being condescending. I'm being accurate. Mom jumped in, clearly trying to diffuse the tension. What your father means is that we want to support you. We're proud of what you've accomplished. Are you? Of course we are. Then why do you look terrified? Because they did look terrified. Not proud, not excited. Terrified. They were staring at me like I'd suddenly revealed myself to be a completely different species, which in a way, I suppose I had. For 17 years, I'd been their manageable child. Predictable, contained, grateful for whatever scraps of attention they threw my way. I'd been someone they could count on to be reasonable, to understand why Emma came first, to accept less without complaint. Now I was someone with more money than they'd ever had, more business success than they'd ever achieved, more options than they'd ever imagined possible. I was someone who didn't need them for anything. And they were realizing, perhaps for the first time, exactly how much damage they'd done to our relationship while they thought I wasn't paying attention. This doesn't change anything, Dad said finally. You're still our daughter. We're still your family. You're right, I said. This doesn't change anything. You've always made it clear that Emma comes first. You've always expected me to be grateful for whatever's left over. You've always assumed I'd be fine because I'm resourceful. That's not. The only thing that's changed is that now I actually am fine. Better than fine. I don't need your college fund or your approval or your belated attempts at support. I stood up, smoothing down my jeans with hands that were perfectly steady. I have a conference call with a client in Vancouver in 20 minutes. We can continue this conversation later if you want. But understand that my business doesn't stop operating because you finally noticed it exists. I walked toward the stairs, then paused and turned back. Oh, and Dad? You don't need to worry about helping me manage my money. I've been doing fine on my own. The conversation never really continued. Over the next few weeks, my parents made various attempts to insert themselves into my business life, offering advice I didn't need, suggesting connections that wouldn't help, proposing family meetings to discuss my future that I was always too busy to attend. Because I genuinely was too busy. Synergy Plus was growing exponentially, and I was hiring aggressively to keep up with demand. I brought on a head of sales, a customer success manager, and 2 more developers. I signed a lease on a small office space downtown and started conducting client meetings in an actual conference room instead of coffee shops. David, Emma's brother-in-law, turned out to be a valuable connection after all. His startup was looking for exactly the kind of business management solutions Synergy Plus provided, and their partnership opened doors to other tech companies that were scaling rapidly and needed better operational systems. By April, I was managing a team of 8 people and fielding acquisition inquiries from larger software companies who'd noticed our growth trajectory. My parents watched all of this unfold with a mixture of pride and bewilderment, like they were observing a nature documentary about their own daughter. They wanted to claim credit for my success, but they couldn't figure out how to insert themselves into a story where they'd played no meaningful role. Emma, meanwhile, had returned from her honeymoon to discover that her little sister had somehow become more financially successful than her new husband. She tried to be supportive in the way that people are supportive when they don't understand what you're actually doing, but know they should say positive things. "It's so great that you have this little computer thing," she said during one of her visits home. "Maybe someday you can teach me how to do it too." I didn't bother explaining that this little computer thing was generating more revenue in a month than most people make in a year. Emma lived in a world where success was measured in wedding dress costs and honeymoon destinations. Business metrics were as foreign to her as quantum physics. But I was beginning to realize that Emma's understanding, or lack thereof, didn't matter anymore. Neither did my parents' belated attempts at support or their obvious discomfort with my independence. I was operating in a completely different sphere now, making decisions that affected multiple employees and dozens of clients, solving problems that required skills they didn't possess and knowledge they couldn't comprehend. I had outgrown them, all of them. The final confrontation came in May, triggered by what should have been a celebration. Synergy Plus had been acquired by a major business software company for $3.2 million. I'd negotiated a deal that allowed me to maintain operational control while gaining access to enterprise-level resources and distribution channels. It was exactly the kind of exit strategy I'd been hoping for: financial security combined with continued growth potential. I'd planned to announce the news quietly, maybe over dinner, treating it as just another business development rather than the life-changing event it actually was. But my parents found the acquisition paperwork before I could tell them myself, and suddenly the house was in chaos again. $3 million? Mom kept saying, like she was trying to make the number make sense through repetition. $3 million. 3.2. I corrected absently, reviewing the employment contracts for my team members who were being brought over to the acquiring company. You sold your business for $3 million and you weren't going to tell us. I was going to tell you, at dinner. It's not like it's a secret. Dad was pacing again, his face cycling through expressions I couldn't decode. This changes everything. Does it? Of course it does. You're a millionaire. You're set for life. You can do anything you want. I could do anything I wanted before the acquisition, too. I just have more options now. We need to talk about your plans, Mom said, settling into the kind of serious parental mode she usually reserved for Emma's crises. This kind of money requires careful planning. I looked up from my laptop. My plans for what? For everything. Where you're going to live, what you're going to do next, how you're going to manage this level of wealth responsibly. I'm 18 years old. I don't need your permission to make plans. You need guidance, Dad interjected. Nobody your age should be handling this kind of financial responsibility alone. Why not? I've been handling every other kind of responsibility alone for the past year. That's different. How is it different? Because he struggled for words. Because this is serious money. This is life changing money. The money I earned from the business I built while you were planning Emma's wedding was already life changing money. This is just more of it. But we want to help, Mom said. We want to be involved. And there it was, the core of the issue that had been building for months. They wanted to be involved now, when there was something exciting and profitable to be involved in. They wanted to claim a role in the success they'd played no part in creating. Where were you when I needed help building the business? I asked calmly. Where were you when I was teaching myself contract law and employment regulations? Where were you when I was working 18-hour days trying to meet client deadlines? We didn't know. You didn't know because you weren't paying attention. You were too busy focusing on Emma's needs, Emma's wedding, Emma's everything. That's not fair, Mom said. Emma was getting married. That's a major life event. And building a successful business isn't. Of course it is, but what? But you only notice major life events when they involve Emma? But my achievements don't count unless they're happening at convenient times? But I'm supposed to understand when you ignore me for 11 months and then suddenly want to be involved when there's money to manage? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. We love you, Dad said finally. We've always loved you. Have you? Of course we have. Then why does it feel like you're meeting me for the first time right now? Why do you look so surprised that I'm capable of success? Why didn't you notice that I'd become financially independent until my bank statement showed up in your mail? Mom started, then stopped. We thought you were fine, Dad finished quietly. You always seemed fine? I seemed fine because I learned early that nobody was coming to help me. I learned to be fine because needing help meant being disappointed. I learned to be invisible because visible meant being compared to Emma and found lacking. I closed my laptop and stood up. I was fine. I am fine. I'm better than fine. I'm successful and independent and surrounded by people who respect my work and value my contributions. We respect your work, Mom said desperately. Do you? Can you name 3 of my clients? Do you know what Synergy Plus actually does? Do you understand what problems my software solves or why businesses pay for it? They stared at me blankly. I have a team of 8 people who depend on me for their livelihoods. I have clients in 12 states who trust me with their business operations. I have investors who believe in my vision for the future of small business technology. I paused, letting that sink in. And I have parents who just noticed I exist because I'm suddenly wealthy enough to matter. That's not true, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? When's the last time you asked me about my interests that weren't related to school? When's the last time you supported a dream of mine that didn't come with a practical backup plan? When's the last time you made me feel like my happiness mattered as much as Emma's? We've always wanted you to be happy, Mom whispered. You've always wanted me to be easy. There's a difference. I walked toward the door, then turned back one final time. I'm moving out next month. I'm buying a house, and I'm moving my operations there. You're welcome to visit if you want, but understand that I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your financial support or your life guidance or your belated attempts at parental involvement. You're still our daughter, Dad said. Yes, I agreed. I'm your daughter who became successful despite your neglect, not because of your support. I'm your daughter who learned to thrive in the margins while you were spotlighting Emma. I'm your daughter who built something amazing while you weren't watching. And I'm your daughter who doesn't need you anymore. I bought a house in June, a beautiful mid-century modern with a home office that could accommodate my growing team and a guest room for visiting clients. It was in a neighborhood 20 minutes from my parents' house, close enough to visit, but far enough to feel like a different world. Emma came to the housewarming party, marveling at the hardwood floors and stainless steel appliances, like she was touring a museum exhibit. She brought her husband and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my parents spent on my last 3 birthdays combined. This is incredible, she said, wandering through the living room where my team was mingling with clients and local business owners. I had no idea your little computer business was so successful. It's not a little computer business anymore. David told her gently. He'd become a genuine friend over the past few months, one of the few people who understood both the technical and business sides of what I was building. Your sister is running a major software company now. It's just software, Emma said dismissively. It's not like she's saving lives or anything. I almost corrected her. Software that helps small businesses operate efficiently does save livelihoods and sometimes lives, but I realized I didn't need to. Emma's understanding was no longer relevant to my success or my happiness. My parents came to the party too, moving through my house like tourists in a foreign country. They smiled politely at my employees, made small talk with my clients, and asked questions that revealed how little they still understood about what I actually did. So you help people with their computers? One of them asked Sarah, my head of customer success. Not exactly, Sarah replied patiently. We provide integrated business management solutions that help companies streamline their operations and improve their efficiency metrics. Oh, Mom said blankly. That sounds very technical. I watched these interactions with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying tribal customs. These were my people now, the clients who trusted me with their business challenges, the employees who'd committed their careers to my vision, the partners who saw my potential for continued growth. And then there was my family, trying their best to seem supportive while clearly out of their depth. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, my parents lingered in the kitchen while I cleaned up. This is all very impressive, Dad said, gesturing around the house that I'd bought with my own money, furnished with my own taste, filled with evidence of my own success. Thank you. We're proud of you, Mom added. We always knew you'd do well. I looked at them, really looked at them, and saw something I'd never noticed before. They looked older, smaller somehow, diminished, like they'd spent so much energy orbiting Emma's brightness that they'd forgotten how to shine on their own. Did you? I asked gently. Did you always know? Of course we did, Dad said quickly. You were always so smart, so determined. Smart enough to figure things out on my own, determined enough to succeed without help. We would have helped if you'd asked. When? When would I have asked? When you were spending my college fund on Emma's wedding? When you were dismissing my interests as hobbies? When you were explaining why Emma needed more support? They had no answer because there was no answer. I think, I said carefully, that you're proud of me now because I've become successful enough to make you look good. But you weren't interested in helping me become successful when I actually needed support. That's not fair, Mom protested weakly. Maybe not, but it's true. I finished loading the dishwasher and turned to face them. I want you to know that I'm not angry anymore. I'm not hurt or resentful or waiting for apologies. I've moved beyond all of that. That's good, Dad said, looking relieved. I've moved beyond needing your approval or your recognition or your involvement in my life. His relief evaporated. I love you because you're my parents, but I don't need you anymore. And I think that's probably the healthiest thing for all of us. 6 months later, Synergy Plus had grown to 35 employees across 4 offices. I'd launched 2 additional product lines and was negotiating partnerships with major consulting firms who wanted to offer our solutions to their enterprise clients. I was featured on the cover of a regional business magazine as Young Entrepreneur of the Year, and the article mentioned my age exactly once, in the context of how unusual it was for someone my age to have built such a comprehensive understanding of small business operational challenges. My parents framed the magazine cover and put it on their mantelpiece, next to Emma's wedding photos. I discovered this during one of my monthly dinner visits, sitting between the evidence of Emma's perfect day and the proof of my unexpected success. It was an oddly fitting metaphor for the position I'd always occupied in this family, sandwiched between Emma's importance and their belated recognition of my achievements. Mrs. Patterson from next door saw the article, Mom told me over dessert. She couldn't believe our little girl had become such a successful businesswoman. Neither could you, I pointed out mildly. Well, it all happened so fast, Dad said. One day you were applying to colleges, the next day you were running a company. I wasn't applying to colleges. You gave my college fund to Emma, remember? The table went quiet. Even now, 8 months later, they still couldn't quite face the full reality of what they'd done. That worked out for the best, though, Emma said brightly. Look how successful you are now. You probably never would have started the business if you'd gone to college right away. I stared at her, marveling at the breathtaking audacity of that statement. In Emma's world, stealing my education fund had been a favor, a forced gap year that accidentally led to entrepreneurial success. You're right, I said. I probably wouldn't have started Synergy Plus if I'd felt financially secure enough to pursue traditional education. See, everything happens for a reason, she continued, completely missing the implications of what I'd just said. But I could see that my parents understood. They were looking at me with that mixture of pride and discomfort that had become their default expression when confronted with evidence of my independence. I should mention, I said casually, cutting into my slice of pie, that I've been accepted to Stanford's graduate business program. I'm starting in the fall. Graduate program? Mom asked. But you never went to college. I never went to undergraduate college. But when you've built and successfully exited a multi-million-dollar business, admissions committees are willing to make exceptions for life experience. Stanford, Dad repeated. That's one of the best business schools in the country. It's the best business school in the country for what I want to study. I'm particularly interested in their research on scaling technology companies and their entrepreneurship fellowship program. But what about your business? Emma asked. Who's going to run it while you're at school? The same people who are running it now. I have an excellent management team, and the acquiring company has been handling most of the operational details since the acquisition anyway. I'll be doing the MBA part-time while continuing to oversee strategic development. I took another bite of pie, savoring both the dessert and the stunned silence around the table. Also, I should probably mention that Stanford offered me a full scholarship plus a research stipend. Apparently, they're very interested in studying how young entrepreneurs identify and solve business problems in underserved markets. A scholarship, Mom echoed faintly. Full ride, I confirmed. Housing, tuition, books, research funding, plus a living stipend that's actually more than I need since I already have income from the business. That's wonderful, Dad said. And for the first time in months, he sounded genuinely proud rather than confused. It is wonderful, I agreed. It's everything I hoped college would be, but better because I'm going as an equal rather than a dependent. I'm not asking for help or hoping someone else will fund my education or wondering if I'm smart enough to succeed. You were always smart enough, Mom said quietly. Maybe, but now I know I'm smart enough. There's a difference. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how strange it felt to be receiving my parents' approval for academic achievements when their opinion no longer mattered to my sense of self-worth. It was like being offered water after you'd already found your own well. Nice, but unnecessary. I started at Stanford in September, commuting between Palo Alto and my hometown twice a week to maintain oversight of Synergy Plus while pursuing my MBA. It was an ambitious schedule, but I thrived on the complexity of managing multiple demanding commitments. My classmates were impressive. Former consultants, investment bankers, startup founders, military officers. Most of them were 5 to 10 years older than me, with undergraduate degrees from prestigious universities and work experience at major corporations. Initially, some of them seemed skeptical about what an 18-year-old could contribute to graduate-level business discussions. That skepticism evaporated quickly once they realized I wasn't there as an ambitious kid playing pretend, but as someone who'd already built and sold a successful company. Wait, said Marcus, a former Goldman Sachs analyst, during a strategy class discussion about market entry challenges. You actually solved this exact problem when you were expanding Synergy Plus into new geographic markets. Several times, I confirmed. The hardest part isn't identifying the opportunity. It's building local credibility when your brand is unknown. How did you do it? I explained the partnership strategy I'd developed, the way I'd identified respected local business leaders who could serve as credible references, the importance of understanding regional business cultures before attempting to sell into them. The professor, a former McKinsey partner, nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of pragmatic market entry strategy that consulting firms charge hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop. I know, I said. I considered hiring McKinsey before I realized I could figure it out myself for free. The classroom erupted in laughter, and I realized I'd found my people. Not because they were impressed by my age or my money, but because they respected my thinking. For the first time in my life, I was in an environment where being smart and strategic and ambitious wasn't unusual, where success was measured by the quality of your ideas rather than your ability to be accommodating, where everyone was trying to build something significant and mutual support made everyone stronger. Emma's first pregnancy was announced at Thanksgiving dinner with the kind of theatrical flourish she specialized in. A specially wrapped gift box for my parents, containing baby shoes and an ultrasound photo, and a card that read grandparents to be. The family dinner table exploded with excitement. Dad actually teared up while examining the ultrasound photo. Mom immediately started planning nursery themes and researching baby gear. Emma glowed with the special radiance of someone who just claimed center stage for the next 9 months. I congratulated her sincerely. I was genuinely happy that she was happy, and listened to the torrent of pregnancy-related conversation that dominated the rest of the meal. "Have you thought about names?" Mom asked. "We have some ideas," Emma said coyly. "We want to wait and see if it's a boy or girl first." "What about nursery themes?" "Oh, we should go shopping for baby furniture. When are you due? Have you found a pediatrician? What hospital are you delivering at?" The questions cascaded over Emma like a waterfall of attention and excitement. She answered each one with detailed enthusiasm, clearly savoring every moment of being the center of focus. "What about you?" Dad asked suddenly, turning to me. "Any thoughts on being an aunt?" "I think it's wonderful," I said honestly. "I'm looking forward to having a niece or nephew." "Will you have time to help with babysitting?" Mom asked. "I know you're busy with school and business, but family comes first." There it was, the subtle expectation that my time and energy would naturally be available for Emma's needs, just like always. "I'll help when I can," I said diplomatically, "but my schedule is pretty demanding. Between Stanford and Synergy Plus, I don't have a lot of free time." "Surely you can make time for family," Mom pressed. "I make time for family. I'm here, aren't I?" "But Emma's going to need support, especially in the first few months when the baby comes." I looked around the table at 3 adults who apparently expected me to rearrange my graduate studies and business responsibilities to serve as unpaid childcare for Emma's family planning choices. "Emma's going to have her husband, her in-laws, and both of you for support," I pointed out. "Plus, she's not working, so she'll have time to adjust to new motherhood in a way that working parents don't." "It's not about having time," Emma said. "It's about having family support. I'll support you however I can within the boundaries of my existing commitments." "What's more important than family?" Dad asked. "Nothing is more important than family. But family relationships should be balanced and reciprocal. I can't be expected to drop everything for Emma's needs when she's never been expected to accommodate mine." "That's different," Mom said. "You've never needed help the way Emma does." "I've never been allowed to need help the way Emma does," I corrected. "There's a difference between being self-sufficient by choice and being self-sufficient because asking for help means being disappointed." The table went quiet. Emma's pregnancy glow dimmed slightly as she realized that her major announcement wasn't going to result in everyone else reorganizing their lives around her convenience. "I think," I said gently, "that Emma will be a wonderful mother, and her baby will be lucky to have such loving grandparents. I also think that expecting me to serve as backup childcare while I'm pursuing my MBA and running a business is unrealistic." "We're not expecting you to be backup childcare," Dad protested. "Aren't you? What exactly are you expecting when you talk about me making time for family and helping with babysitting?" "We're expecting you to be present," Mom said. "To be involved. To prioritize your family relationships." "I am involved. I'm here for important events. I call regularly, I visit monthly. But I'm not going to put my career development on hold to provide free childcare services." "It's not free childcare," Emma said, looking hurt. "It's being an aunt. Being an aunt means loving my niece or nephew, creating positive memories, and being a supportive figure in their life as they grow up. It doesn't mean being available for regular babysitting duty while you and your husband pursue your own interests." "That's very selfish," Mom said quietly. "Is it? Or is it healthy boundary setting?" "You used to be so helpful," she continued, "so willing to pitch in wherever needed. I used to be so desperate for approval that I'd agree to anything. There's a difference." The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken resentments and unexamined assumptions. I love this family, I said finally, but I won't sacrifice my education, or my business, or my future to be convenient for other people's choices. Emma chose to get pregnant. That's wonderful for her. But it's her responsibility to plan for the support she needs, not mine to provide it unconditionally. Spring semester brought new challenges and opportunities. I was selected for Stanford's Entrepreneurship Fellowship, which came with research funding and access to Silicon Valley's most successful startup founders and venture capitalists. Synergy Plus was thriving under its new corporate ownership, and I was being recruited for the acquiring company's leadership development program. The offer included stock options, international rotation opportunities, and a clear path to executive leadership by age 25. I was also developing a new business concept based on my MBA research, a platform that would help small businesses access and implement artificial intelligence tools without requiring technical expertise. The market opportunity was enormous, and I had the track record to attract serious investor interest. My life was full of possibilities, each more exciting than anything I'd imagined when I was 17 and staring at an empty bank statement. My family's life, meanwhile, revolved increasingly around Emma's pregnancy. Every dinner conversation featured updates on doctor appointments, baby gear purchases, nursery preparations, and Emma's evolving symptoms and cravings. I participated in these conversations when I was present, but my presence was increasingly rare. Between Stanford coursework, Synergy Plus oversight, fellowship research, and the early development of my new AI platform, I was legitimately busy almost every weekend. "You're missing Emma's baby shower," Mom informed me during one of our weekly phone calls. "I know, I'm presenting my research at a conference that weekend." "Can't you reschedule?" "No, Mom, I can't reschedule a research presentation at a national entrepreneurship conference because Emma wants me at her baby shower." "She's your sister, and this is my career. Family should come first." "Family does come first. But Emma's baby shower isn't a family emergency. It's a social event that she planned without consulting my schedule." "She shouldn't have to consult your schedule to plan her own baby shower." "You're right. And I shouldn't have to sacrifice professional opportunities to attend every social event she plans." "This isn't just any social event. This is a major milestone. For Emma, not for me." The conversation ended with familiar frustration on both sides. My mother couldn't understand why I wouldn't prioritize Emma's preferences, and I couldn't understand why she couldn't see that my academic and professional commitments were legitimate constraints on my availability. I sent Emma a beautiful and expensive baby gift with a heartfelt note explaining my absence. She texted back, "Thanks for the gift. Wish you could have been here." No guilt trip, no dramatic accusations, just a simple acknowledgement of reality. It occurred to me that Emma might actually be growing up too, learning to manage her expectations rather than expecting the world to revolve around her schedule. The baby arrived in May, a healthy girl named Charlotte, and the family universe realigned itself once again around Emma's newest starring role. I visited the hospital the day after delivery, bringing flowers and a practical gift package I'd assembled based on advice from friends who were already parents. Emma looked exhausted but radiant, holding her daughter with the careful concentration of someone learning a completely new skill. "She's beautiful," I said honestly. Charlotte was indeed beautiful, tiny and perfect and utterly helpless in the way that makes adults speak in whispers and move like they're afraid of breaking something precious. "Want to hold her?" Emma asked. I accepted the warm, delicate weight of my niece, marveling at her miniature fingernails and the way her eyes seemed to focus on some invisible point just beyond my face. "Hi, Charlotte," I said softly. "I'm your Aunt Sarah. I'm going to teach you about business and technology and how to build things that matter." "She's probably going to be more interested in princess dresses and tea parties," Emma said with a laugh. "Maybe. Or maybe she'll be interested in engineering and entrepreneurship and changing the world. We'll see what she's drawn to naturally." "We will," I agreed, "and whatever she's drawn to, she'll have my support." As I held Charlotte, I thought about the difference between the aunt I wanted to be and the aunt my parents expected me to be. I wanted to be the person who encouraged Charlotte's ambitions, who taught her that she could build anything she could imagine, who showed her that success comes from her own efforts rather than other people's approval. I didn't want to be the person who sacrificed her own goals to provide convenient childcare services. I brought something for you too, I told Emma, handing her an envelope. Inside was information about a college savings account I'd opened for Charlotte, seeded with enough money to cover 4 years at any university in the country. Sarah, Emma breathed, staring at the account details. This is this is incredible, but it's too much. No child should have to worry about whether their education is affordable, I said firmly. Charlotte will have choices that I didn't have. But you succeeded anyway. I succeeded despite obstacles, not because of them. Charlotte shouldn't have to overcome obstacles that I can prevent. Emma looked up at me with something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Respect. Thank you, she said. This is the most generous gift anyone has ever given us. It's not a gift, I corrected gently. It's an investment. In Charlotte's future and in a world where girls don't have to choose between their family's financial priorities. 2 weeks later, I graduated from Stanford with my MBA and a job offer from one of Silicon Valley's most prestigious venture capital firms. The offer included a starting salary that was more than both my parents made combined, plus equity in a portfolio of startups that were positioned to become major market players. And I also had a term sheet from investors who wanted to fund my AI platform concept with enough capital to hire a world-class development team and scale rapidly into national markets. For the first time in my life, I had too many good options instead of too few. My parents came to my graduation, sitting in the audience as I walked across the stage with my class of accomplished professionals. They looked proud but slightly overwhelmed, like they still couldn't quite believe that their resourceful younger daughter had earned a graduate degree from one of the world's most competitive business programs. "We're so proud," Mom said, at the post-graduation dinner I'd arranged at a nice restaurant near campus. "Thank you." "What's next?" Dad asked. "Are you going to take the venture capital job?" "I'm still deciding. It's an incredible opportunity to learn about scaling businesses and identifying market opportunities. But I'm also excited about building my own company again." "The AI thing?" "The AI platform? Yes. The market opportunity is massive, and I have a vision for how to make artificial intelligence accessible to small business owners who can't afford enterprise-level solutions." "That sounds very technical," Mom said. "It is technical, but it's also fundamentally about solving real problems for real people, which is what I've always been good at." "Will you move back home while you decide?" she asked hopefully. "No. I'm buying a house in Palo Alto. I want to be close to the startup ecosystem regardless of which opportunity I pursue." "Palo Alto is expensive," Dad pointed out. "I can afford it. But wouldn't it make more sense to save money by living at home?" I looked at him with genuine confusion. Why would I want to live at home? I'm 20 years old, I have an MBA from Stanford, and I'm financially independent. Why would I move backwards? "It's not moving backwards, it's being practical about money." "Dad, I made more money last year than you've made in any 3 years of your career. Moving back home wouldn't be practical, it would be regressive." "There's no need to be rude about it." "I'm not being rude. I'm being factual. I've outgrown the need for parental supervision and financial guidance." "You'll always be our daughter," Mom said. "Of course I will, but I'll never again be your dependent child. There's a difference." As we drove back to the hotel where they were staying, I realized that this was probably the last conversation we'd have where they tried to give me life advice as if I still needed their guidance. Not because they'd stop offering advice, but because the gap between my capabilities and their understanding had become too wide to bridge. I loved them, but I'd moved beyond them. And for the first time, that felt like liberation rather than loss. I chose to start my own company. The venture capital offer was tempting. A guaranteed high salary, access to incredible deal flow, the chance to learn from some of the smartest investors in the world. But the AI platform opportunity felt like unfinished business, a chance to build something that could genuinely change how small businesses operate. I raised $12 million in Series A funding, assembled a team of brilliant engineers and business developers, and launched IntelliOps in the fall. Within 6 months, we had over 1,000 small business clients using our AI tools to optimize their operations, predict customer behavior, and automate routine administrative tasks. By my 21st birthday, IntelliOps was valued at $50 million dollars and growing rapidly. I was profiled in Forbes as one of the Hackawar 30 under 30 inches entrepreneurs to watch, and my story became a case study in Stanford's entrepreneurship program. My parents read the Forbes article with the kind of bewildered pride that had become their default response to my achievements. They understood that what I was doing was impressive, but they didn't understand what I was actually doing or why it mattered. Emma, meanwhile, was navigating the exhausting reality of new motherhood. Charlotte was a beautiful, demanding baby who required constant attention and seemed to sleep only in 20-minute intervals. Emma looked perpetually tired but genuinely happy, like she'd found the role she was meant to play. "I don't know how you manage everything," she told me during one of my visits home. "Running a company, managing employees, dealing with investors. It seems so stressful." "It is stressful sometimes," I admitted, "but it's also energizing. I love building things, solving problems, creating systems that help people work more efficiently." "I could never do what you do." "You could if you wanted to. You're more capable than you think." "Maybe, but I don't want to. This is what I want." She gestured around her beautifully appointed living room, where Charlotte was sleeping in an expensive bassinet surrounded by toys and baby gear. "I want to focus on my family, create a beautiful home, be present for all of Charlotte's milestones." "That's wonderful," I said, and I meant it. "There's nothing wrong with choosing family over career if that's what makes you happy." "Do you ever think about having kids?" "Someday, maybe, but not anytime soon. I have too much I want to build first." "What if you wait too long?" "Then I'll adopt or use donor eggs, or decide that building companies is my form of creating something lasting." That's very practical. It's realistic. I refuse to make major life decisions based on artificial timelines or other people's expectations. Emma nodded, but I could see that she didn't really understand. In her world, success meant finding the right partner, getting married at the right time, having children before some biological deadline imposed by nature and social convention. In my world, success meant building something that mattered, creating value for other people, proving that I could solve problems that nobody else had figured out how to solve. We were both happy, but we were happy in completely different ways. The final reconciliation came on Charlotte's first birthday. Emma had planned an elaborate party, professional photographer, custom decorations, gourmet catering, entertainment that seemed designed more for adult guests than a 1-year-old who would sleep through most of the festivities. I arrived early to help with setup, bringing a gift that I'd spent considerable thought selecting, a beautiful wooden toy that would grow with Charlotte as she developed, encouraging creativity and problem-solving rather than passive consumption. "This is gorgeous," Emma said, examining the handcrafted blocks and shapes. "Where did you find it?" "I had it custom made by a toy maker in Vermont who specializes in educational toys. Each piece is designed to teach a different concept: spatial reasoning, cause and effect, basic engineering principles." "She's only 1, Emma said with a laugh. "The best time to start developing problem-solving skills is early. By the time she's 3, she'll be building complex structures and understanding how different components work together." "You think about everything in terms of building and systems, don't you?" "I think about everything in terms of potential. What could this become? How could this work better? What problems could this solve?" "That's very you." "Is that good or bad?" "It's perfect for you. It's probably perfect for Charlotte, too. She's going to need an aunt who thinks differently than the rest of us." As guests began arriving, I watched my parents interact with Emma's in-laws, Charlotte's various cousins and family friends, the community of people who had rallied around this new baby with gifts and attention and promises of ongoing support. It occurred to me that Charlotte would grow up surrounded by love in a way that I never had, but also surrounded by expectations in a way that might limit her options. She would be encouraged and celebrated and supported, but she might also be shaped by other people's definitions of success and happiness. "I want to make you a promise," I told Charlotte later, when I was holding her during a quiet moment between the chaos of party activities. She looked up at me with the serious concentration that babies bring to studying new faces. "I promise that I will always encourage you to build whatever you want to build. I promise that I will never give away your opportunities to fund someone else's party. I promise that I will notice your achievements and celebrate your independence and support your dreams even if they're different from what everyone else expects." I promise that I will show you that love doesn't mean making yourself smaller to make other people comfortable. And I promise that I will teach you that you don't need anyone's permission to become who you're meant to be. Charlotte's attention had already moved on to something more interesting than my monologue, but I felt better for having said it out loud. Making promises to babies now? David asked, appearing beside me with a plate of birthday cake. Making promises to the future, I corrected. Charlotte's going to need options that previous generations didn't have. She's lucky to have you as an aunt. She's lucky to have parents who love her unconditionally. The aunt thing is just bonus. Is it weird being back here? Being around all this domestic celebration when your life is so different? I considered the question, looking around at the party that represented everything my family valued. Traditional milestones, conventional success, the kind of happiness that comes from meeting social expectations. It's not weird, I said finally. It's just different. Emma found her path to happiness and I found mine. There's room for both approaches in the world. That's very mature. It's very real. For the first time in my life, I don't need my family to understand my choices or validate my priorities. I can love them without needing them to be different than they are. That sounds like freedom. It is freedom, the best kind. The freedom that comes from knowing you can create your own definition of success. As the party wound down and guests began leaving, my parents approached me in the kitchen where I was helping Emma clean up. Thank you for being here, Mom said. I know how busy you are. I wanted to be here. Charlotte's first birthday is important. We've been thinking, Dad said, glancing at Mom for support, about everything that's happened over the past few years, about the college fund and the way we handled things. Okay. We made mistakes, Mom continued. We didn't see how capable you were, how much you were achieving on your own. We were so focused on helping Emma that we forgot you might need help too. You were focused on helping Emma because Emma asked for help, I said gently. I learned early that asking for help meant being disappointed, so I stopped asking. That's our fault, Dad said. We should have seen that. Maybe, but it worked out fine. I learned to be self-reliant, which served me well when I needed to build something from nothing. We're proud of you, Mom said. We want you to know that. I know you are, and I'm proud of what I've built. But I don't need your pride anymore to feel good about my achievements. That sounds harsh, she said, looking hurt. It's not harsh, it's healthy. Children need their parents' approval to develop self-worth. Adults create their own sense of worth through their actions and achievements. So our opinion doesn't matter to you anymore? Your opinion matters because I love you. But it doesn't determine my sense of success or my life choices. That's probably how it should be, Dad said quietly. It is how it should be. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the three of us finally understanding our new dynamic. They would always be my parents, and I would always be their daughter. But I was no longer their responsibility, their project, or their reflection. I was my own person, with my own company, my own house, my own definition of success. And that was exactly how it should be. 5 years later, IntelliOps was acquired by Microsoft for $400 million. I was 26 years old, worth more money than I could spend in several lifetimes, and building my third company with the kind of experienced confidence that comes from having succeeded before. Charlotte was 6, precocious, and curious, and already showing signs of the kind of problem-solving intelligence that would serve her well regardless of what path she chose. Emma was pregnant with her second child and genuinely happy with her role as a full-time mother and community volunteer. My parents had retired early, using dividends from stock I'd given them to travel and pursue hobbies they'd never had time for during their working years. They were proud of my success in the way that people are proud of historical events they weren't present for, impressed but not personally invested. And I was exactly where I'd always wanted to be, building something that mattered, surrounded by people who respected my work, creating solutions for problems that genuinely needed solving. The girl who'd stared at an empty bank statement with tears in her eyes was gone, replaced by a woman who'd learned that the best revenge is a life so successful that your former oppressors become irrelevant to your happiness. I'd built everything I'd ever wanted, and I'd done it entirely on my own terms. That, I realized, was worth more than any college fund could ever have been.